Morning, everyone. I would like to welcome all of you to the SLC3's Safety Forum, Workplace, Site Violence, and Active Shooter Preparedness. My name is Michael Hargrave. I'm the Construction Safety Manager at BJC Healthcare, co-chair of the SLC3 Safety Committee, as well as a member of the SLC3 Board. And on behalf of the Safety Committee and the SLC3 leadership, we're pleased you could join us this morning for this exciting program. Now, before I introduce you to our guest speaker today, I have a few housekeeping items. As this is a virtual program, I do want to touch on some program etiquette. First, I hope you have all found a quiet place to participate this morning, far away from any distractions. We want to make sure everyone has a great experience this morning, so please keep your microphones muted. We will have a Q&A session beginning at 9:15 a.m. We ask that you put your questions and comments in the chat, and during the open session, we will address as many of the questions as we can. Kelly and I will monitor the chat for the Q&A portion of the program. If your question is being discussed, you may feel free to unmute your microphone to follow up with the answer to your question. This process will keep us orderly for the entire portion. Please note our virtual programs are recorded, so a copy of this program will be available for attendees after the presentation. I wanted to quickly review our agenda today. Mr. Michael R. Lauer, MBA, Executive Director, Emergency Preparedness, EH&S, and Security at BJC Healthcare, will begin his presentation about 8:10 a.m. and finish around 9:15 a.m., allowing us time for the Q&A. Kelly Jackson, our Executive Director, will follow up to close out our meeting. And for those of you who don't know us, the SLC3 is a community of design and construction industry professionals with a common interest in the betterment of our region. Our planning committee has identified 4 key pillars for our organization: innovation, continuing education, equity empowerment, and all-inclusive workforce collaboration. Speaking of continuing education, I would like to acknowledge our safety committee. Our safety committee meets monthly to prepare for events like this one, but also to collaborate on important health and safety topics, discuss blog topics, develop safety goals, and other activities to support the SLC3's mission. I want to thank my associate co-chair of the committee, Deborah Kemp, with Kadeen, for her continued assistance and support, especially with this program. As a reminder, if you have an interest in serving on our Health and Safety Committee, please reach out to me or the SLC3 staff. Kelly is always eager to share information for getting more involved with the SLC3. And don't forget our website also has a lot of great information. As an additional benefit of your participation, this program has been developed to permit you to qualify for 1.5 professional development hours, or PDH, for professional engineers, and 1.5 learning units, LUs, through the American Institute of Architects. Documentation was sent to you and is on the SLC3 website on the resources page. We always seek your evaluations at the conclusion of each program. Please take a couple of minutes to answer a few quick questions sent to your inbox regarding this program. The evaluations and comments are used to prepare for future programming, as well as to determine the overall value of our education and networking events and programs throughout the year. We do take all evaluations seriously and always hope to improve on our programs and our presentations. We're proud to say that we've been appreciative of the high marks we've received throughout the pandemic and specifically for our virtual program presentations. The SLC3 celebrates its 50th anniversary this year. We've had a packed calendar and hopefully all of you are marking our events in your personal calendars so you may join us. We have had some great events coming up. September 28th is our first ever night at the ballpark, hosted by our Emerging Leaders Committee. Registration is limited, so don't wait. Tickets are being sold online. And then on September 30th is our popular Owners Roundtable and Top Concerns, which fills up quickly. On October 22nd, we have the Design and Technology Conference. And on October 29th is our very popular Sporting Clays event. This event does sell out in record time, and I hear we are looking for sponsors, so please check that out. There is a calendar update we do need to let you know about. Due to restrictions imposed on a number of our owner members, we regretfully have chosen to postpone our 50th anniversary event to April 2022. This will hopefully allow both our owner and associate members to participate and celebrate this accomplishment in person. The SLC3 calendar of events is available on the website. Please make note of that for all future programs and events. We also want to take time to note some safety messages. First, the SLC3 has sent out to its members a communication recommending vaccinations. It is our position vaccinations will not only reduce the spread of the COVID-19, it will help us all to keep working. And our hashtag KeepSTL Working campaign is still important to us, and we hope to all of you too. In addition, for our live events, we have chosen to require attendees to be vaccinated or to show proof of a negative COVID test result within the previous 48 hours. If you have any questions about this policy, please see Executive Director Kelly Jackson. Now, our staff wanted me to note that checks are still being sent to our old address. Please make sure to use our new mailing address of 301 Sovereign Court to avoid delays in payments and registrations. Last but not least, before our program begins, we want to take time to give special recognition to our annual training and education program sponsors. Our annual platinum sponsor is Kazany Wagner. We appreciate their top-tier support each year. Our gold sponsors are McGrath and Associates, Ross and Berrezzini, Kwame Building Group, and L. Keeley. Our silver sponsors are Farnsworth Group, Kaiser Electric, JF Electric, Hankins Construction Company, Abna Engineering, OWH Architects, Custom Engineering, and Hush Blackwell. Annual sponsorships are truly the best way to support the SLC3's mission of providing excellent continuing education. We're ready to begin the program. Please welcome Mike Lauer. Mike is the Executive Director of Emergency Preparedness, Environmental Health and Safety, and Security for BJC Healthcare System, which is comprised of 14 hospitals in Missouri and Illinois, with the largest being Barnes Jewish Hospital, a 1,200+ bed hospital affiliated with the Washington University School of Medicine, located in St. Louis, Missouri. In this role, Mike is responsible for overseeing emergency management, environmental health and safety, plus security services for all of BJC Healthcare's hospitals, clinics, and office buildings. Prior to moving into his current role, Mike was the executive director for the Barnes Jewish Hospital Public Safety Department, a public safety communication center, security access systems, emergency preparedness, as well as 5 other non-clinical support services at the hospital. Mike earned a bachelor's in criminal justice from Sterling College in Kansas. He also holds a Master of Business Administration from Webster University and is a graduate of the FBI National Academy's 185th session. In addition to his current role, Mike served as the Director of Public Safety for St. Louis University from 2008 until 2010. And he was a police officer with the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department from December 1987 until January 2008. At retirement, Mr. Lauer was the Lieutenant Commander of the Homicide Section. We promise this program will explain what workplace violence is, current workplace violence trends, and what to look out for. Mike will also discuss active shooter preparedness and violence, both at work and on our project sites. We're excited to hear from you, Mike. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So for my presentation, Rebecca, I need to pull up my screen. I just want to make sure you're okay with that.
Yes, sir. You can pull up your screen and share from your location so that you have complete control over the slides.
Oh, oops. Hopefully we can get that to occur.
If
There we go. Oh, no, never mind. Okay, everybody can see me?
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure I'm sharing. So, yeah, I put this up here as an introduction as well, but Michael's already gone through most of my career. So, yes, I did spend 20 years with the St. Louis Police Department, serving the city from the age of 21 until my retirement 20 years later. I retired as the commander of homicide for the final 3 years of my career, where we encountered not only a lot of workplace violence, but also family violence that nowadays is even more apropos, just because of the fact that a lot of people in our community are now working from home. A lot of times, the workplace violence that we're seeing in our community is actually our home violence now. For my current role, I stepped into the emergency management director role. EH&S stands for Environmental Health and Safety, which is part of Michael's responsibilities in my team. And then I have security for the system. We have security at all 14 of our hospitals. But also I am the co-lead for our workplace violence team at BJC. So I have a lot of insight into what we are currently seeing in healthcare, which what we see in hospitals. And I know that that for the most part you don't work inside of a hospital, but what we see in hospitals is a microcosm of what we're seeing in our communities. Everything that occurs within the doors of the hospitals are occurring on the outside as well. And we have homeless issues, we have behavioral health issues, we have theft issues, and we have to try and manage a lot of social issues within the walls of our hospitals as we're taking care of people that lead to workplace violence against our staff. Healthcare is one of the, or not the most high volume areas for where we are seeing workplace violence over the past couple of years. And the pandemic has made that even more so. And I'll talk a little bit about that as we go along. So we will talk today about violence in the workplace. We will talk about how violence in the community affects what we see within our workplace. And then lastly, we will go through active shooter preparedness and response. So OSHA defines workplace violence as any act or threat of physical violence, harassment, intimidation, or other threatening, disruptive behavior that occurs at the work site. So that's a pretty broad definition, but it encompasses a lot of things that we see. What we are seeing more of now is that as people recognize these definitions and that they become more on the forefront, and people are becoming more proactive about what is occurring in the in the workplace, we are seeing more and more reported threats of violence. So it used to be that that we would only receive physical violence. So if we're treating a patient and they're coming out of anesthesia and they have a brain injury, a lot of times those people are combative as they evolve through their illness. So nurses are getting struck, pushed, spit upon. So we would get those reports, and we would see large numbers of those incidents across healthcare. But we are seeing more and more now that employees are to the point where now they are reporting the verbal threats as well, the bullying, just the snide comments as workplace violence, which is a significant change from what we've seen just in the past couple of years. And then OSHA estimates about 2 million workers report workplace violence incidents each year. So it's a significant number across the country. And these are just examples of workplace violence. So threatening behaviors. I mean, it can be anything that it goes from shaking your fist to destroying property in anger, intentional vandalism. So people graffiti on bathroom walls that is targeted towards coworkers. Intentional sabotage of the workplace to try and either harm or threaten. A noose that was placed in a very visible place for people to see. Theft would be a form of workplace violence if it is utilized in a way that causes someone to become upset. So if you are intentionally stealing things from somebody's desk or from somebody's toolbox, you are essentially being a bit of a bully, and that could be considered workplace violence. And then verbal or written threats, we talked about that, or I just talked about that just a minute ago. Graffiti on walls, leaving notes on somebody's desk anonymously, placing notes on their doors. And then harassments, behaviors that demean, embarrass, humiliate, annoy. But the key to this sentence is that it's known or would be expected to be unwelcome. So I am sure that we see in the workplace, we see a lot of gestures, pranks that would not be considered workplace violence. But at some point, those step over a line, and as the person who is making those comments, that you're stepping over a line. That is when it would be unwelcome. And I know that that's a very broad definition of harassment, but that is what OSHA is using for harassment definition. And then the verbal abuse, we talked about swearing. If we counted every swearing incident, I'm on a construction site, I'm sure that the numbers would be extremely high, but it is targeted swearing is what we're talking about. The very in your face type of yelling, swearing, curse words. Physical attacks are the obvious ones: hitting, shoving, pushing, kicking. And then they go through some extremes there. And we do see that workplace violence sometimes does lead to those higher levels of crime, mostly the arson or the murder that could occur. And in my past history, I talked about, I was commander of homicide for a while. We did see instances where physical attacks escalated to murder. There was 2 incidents that we specifically handled. One of them was at a catering company up on North Broadway, where a disgruntled employee came in and killed the owner and the owner's wife, and then some other coworkers. So that became more of an active shooter type of event, but it all began from a disgruntled employee who was upset about a paycheck. Bullying, uninvited physical contact, sarcastic jokes, teasing, all of those things that we recognize as bullying from our life history, from childhood to adulthood. So there's a significant cost to workplace violence. 18,000 workplace violence assaults are logged each week in the United States, with an estimated cost of $121 billion in lost productivity, lawsuits, settlements, importantly, damaged reputation, and lost sales or contracts. So, if there's a high-profile incident within your company, not only could it cost money in lawsuits, settlements, but the damaged reputation that we could incur, could harm business, could harm our ability to recover our business, and may end up costing more money than just in settlements and and lawsuits if we have to contract with other services, such as media relations, communications teams, to kind of come back in and try and rebuild the reputation of our business. And then, according to OSHA, specifically for our construction industry, there were 971 workplace violence deaths in 2017. And of those 971, 56 of them were construction industry related. So while that number is right around 5%, that's a significant number of workplace violence deaths. So what can we do as an industry? And so, for instance, in the healthcare industry, we develop a zero tolerance policy towards workplace violence. We state it. It's in our value system. And I recommend that any company takes that same tack. When we say zero tolerance, and this is a word, or it's a term that also breeds a lot of confusion, because on the nursing side, if in that example where you have a patient that is coming out of anesthesia and they become combative, some nurses will want to press charges against that patient, and the patient sometimes isn't cognizant of their actions. They're not even aware of what they've done. So the nurses will throw that zero tolerance back at us and say, you said zero tolerance and I was assaulted. I want that patient arrested. And that's not what zero tolerance means. What it means is that we don't tolerate workplace violence, but there are circumstances within our communities, within our workplaces, where we have to deal with things on a multi-level, multifaceted level. There's a progression that we manage, and it doesn't automatically go to termination right from the beginning. So there is some confusion about those words, but zero tolerance is a philosophy that we should express as one of our core values. And then we recommend that you develop a well-written and implemented workplace violence prevention program, a well-stated. It should be part of your safety and health program. I know that on work sites, you will do safety checks, you will have safety meetings, you'll have safety trainings. There is part of your workplace violence discussion should take place during that time period. Remind people that it's not tolerated, and that if they witness workplace violence, if they're a victim of workplace violence, we need you to bring those discussions forward. You need to bring them and talk to us. It should be in your employee handbook, something that they can reference whenever they need it. And it's critical that employees understand the workplace violence policy, and that all claims of workplace violence will be investigated and remedied promptly. And that's part of cultural development. I'll talk about this a little bit as we go forward, but we need to make sure that we are having everyday discussions with our staff, building relationships where they feel that they can bring issues forward and raise topics within the workplace that they're uncomfortable with or that they see. And a lot of that is just being able to know that this is important to the industry, it's important to the employer, and if it's important to the industry and the employer, then it'll be important to the employee. So recommendations for mitigating workplace violence is to perform regular background checks on employees, especially at the point of hire. We want to know that what their past experiences have been with other employers, whether or not they have a significant criminal background that may be bringing in some unwelcome performance or unwelcome attitudes, unwelcome physical aggression into the workplace. We talked about adopting a zero tolerance policy, getting to know your employees. And as I said, that is critical. Having those one-on-one conversations with people In healthcare, we call it rounding. Um, the manager, the director, the vice president, getting out and just talking with staff, having a touch base, getting to know them. I, in the precipitating minutes of this call, this meeting, there was a lot of conversation about, how are you doing? How are the children? How's the wife? That is exactly what we need to do with each other as we in our place of employment. It is critical for us to be able to have discussions with our employees on a personal level, not that we're asking personal questions, but if we're just having discussions and they offer personal tidbits about themselves, to put that in your memory bank so that when we have our discussions with employees, I know your mom died a couple weeks ago. How are you doing? How is the family doing? Is there anything you need from us? Those basic conversations that we develop over time, when there is a critical incident or a critical issue with our employees, those will help us in the long run because people will feel safe in coming forward and talking to those people who have those open avenues of communication. So we need to get involved and be active with our employees. Properly train staff on the warning signs of workplace violence, and I will go over those in just a couple minutes. But having these continual conversations during our safety talks about workplace violence and the importance of it will allow people to make it safe to speak up, and that is our ultimate goal. There are so many times in our past country's history, especially over the past probably 10 years, where there have been major incidents of violence in open forums, in workplaces, in buildings. And oftentimes there is the background of, well, we felt that it was coming, we saw issues, but we didn't raise them. It's okay to speak up. We would rather you bring it forward now and it be nothing, as opposed to keeping something to yourself and us missing an opportunity to prevent workplace violence. So provide help to employees who are experiencing stress. It's okay to speak to someone, including EAP. There is nothing wrong with EAP. EAP should be a private process anyway. There's no reason for any of our coworkers to know that somebody is involved in an EAP process, and an EAP is just a counseling team that will come out and or not come out, but a counseling team that we can go to discreetly to talk about issues. Set rules for terminated employees, and what that means is when someone is terminated, we take their badge. Based upon what we see are the reasons for the terminations, there may be extra steps that we need to take. But the primary thing is to make sure we have a discussion with the person that's being terminated. The badge is taken. If you have access controls are turned off, especially in the event that we didn't get the badge, or if they had another badge. Sometimes we have employees who have a badge, they claim they lost a badge, they get a new badge. We want to make sure that there's not multiple badges out there. But this is also the time that we have a discussion with the terminated employee about what we expect from them. And sometimes that expectation is you're not allowed back on the workplace. You are not allowed to email. You can phone call us if you have any questions. Here's a phone number to call. This is the person you need to have a conversation with. If the person is terminated because of threats in the workplace or violence in the workplace, there may be times where we have in healthcare within BJC, where if we have a terminated employee who's made verbal threats of violence or actively shown propensity for violence, where we may need to share a photo and some information with staff, so that they know that that employee is no longer allowed here, so that if they are seen walking through a front door, that they can raise an alarm, raise an alert that that person's not supposed to be here anymore. It doesn't mean that we share all of the information about an incident, but we need to make sure that we give our teams enough information, private information that is not to make sure that they are able to speak up if they see something that shouldn't be occurring. Secure the workplace just talks about the access controls. And then we want to make sure that we work with security or law enforcement to investigate threats. Uh, when there are major threats, serious threats made to a healthcare facility, a construction industry, a restaurant, we need to get law enforcement involved. Sometimes that's just to make them aware of the threat. Sometimes it's to investigate the background of the threat. We can check for people whether or not they have they have weapons, they have gun permits. Law enforcement can look into their background to determine whether or not they have a history of violence that may be relevant to the employer. There is also another thing that when I was thinking about this last night, something that we're starting to see a lot of. We saw it in a community in Farmington 2 days ago. We saw it at one of our local hospitals last week, where it's what's called swatting. And what it is, at least in the incident that occurred at our local hospital last week, is that somebody created so they mirrored somebody's email address, and then they sent an email to leadership within in one of our hospitals, claiming that they were upset about the treatment of a family member, and that they were going to come up to the hospital and they were going to start killing the little children and the elderly women that they could see around the campus. So obviously that raised alarms for the hospital. We contacted the local law enforcement, and when we relayed the name of the person, they immediately recognized the person's name as somebody who had been a victim of swatting in the past. And what that means is that somebody creates a profile that makes it look like someone else. They make threats to an employer in order to get a large law enforcement presence sent to that person's house, essentially a SWAT team to the house. That's why they call it swatting. So I've seen 2 instances of that in the last week. So it is something that we're starting to see that we at least need to investigate. And then these are the warning signs of workplace violence. Obviously, threats are one of them, but unreasonable behaviors. And a lot of these are when we start to see changes in behaviors. So if you have somebody who is all of a sudden showing unreasonable behaviors, or they are becoming intimidating, they're very control oriented, or you see them becoming paranoid, angry, angrier, the anger is changing. There's some things that are changing within their life that's causing them to become more argumentative. They lack impulse controls. When they make mistakes, they typically do not accept blame. They will start to make excuses and blame others. Or you see the antisocial behaviors. When you hear people that talk about violence a lot, they applaud violence. When there's an incident, an active shooter incident in another state, they want to talk about it. They want to harp on it. They want to focus on it. They want to, if they make comments in agreement with it, they talk of shooting sprees. If they're obsessed with weapons, or they begin to show obsessions with weapons, these are all warning signs that we at least need to bring forward to others, or at least monitor. And as you see more and more of these stacked on top of one of each other, we need to have conversations with others to begin some interventions or to take action. If you hear vindictive comments, one of these days I'm going to make them pay, especially if it's geared towards supervisor management. We want to make sure that these are brought forward, and that's why we build up those conversations with our staff, so that not only we as leaders recognize changes in behaviors, but also we're building up our cache, our book of information from our employees that let them know that when they start to hear these, that they bring them forward. We see bizarre, weird behaviors that are coupled with other signs. Um, like I said, a lot of these we stack them up, and the more we see, the more relevant they become. Desperation. If we're starting to see employees who are going through divorces, they're going through a death in the family, they're starting to bring, uh, they're starting to have financial issues. If we see that they're becoming more desperate, that may be a trigger sign. Obsessive compulsive behaviors, and there's a lot of people that have extreme obsessive compulsive behaviors. There's some people that have minor obsessive compulsive behaviors. So the minor obsessive compulsive behaviors are not something I would typically worry about. But I can tell you that a lot of the instances where I've seen murder suicides, or where we've seen suicides, there was significant obsessive compulsive behaviors in one of the people involved. I investigated a suicide, probably 12 years ago, and it was somebody who took an overdose of pills, which, a suicide is violence against yourself. So, but when we were in the house, it was very obvious that the person had some very obsessive compulsive behaviors. There were no pictures on the walls. There was nothing hanging on the walls. When you opened up a cabinet, all the cans of food were perfectly lined up like you would see at Arlington National Cemetery. There was stacks of clothing that had been purchased and never worn, with notes on top of them where the clothing had been purchased, so that family members could return the clothing. Those are the extreme obsessive compulsive behaviors that we're talking about. It oftentimes is a warning sign. Substance abuse. We are starting to see changes in behaviors of our, especially people who have behavioral health issues with the use of marijuana. If people that have an underlying behavioral health issue, marijuana can make those behavioral health issues more acute, and we're seeing them come out especially in the healthcare setting, where people are becoming more physically violent based upon COVID has taken away a lot of their support systems. It's taken away their access to family, their access to behavioral health care. And then when you tie that on to some drug issues, it is becoming very chronic and very acute in the healthcare setting. And when that is occurring in the healthcare setting, it's also occurring in our communities, in our streets, and in our workplaces. And then chronic depression. So trust your instincts. We often talk about our gut instincts, and our gut will tell us a lot, and our gut is really our brain. So our brain sees things, and little tidbits that are off, that are different, we will note. And that is what we always call, trust your instincts, trust your gut. If you feel that something is changing or that something is wrong, it is extremely important that we bring that forward. If you're walking across a parking lot late at night, and your body will tell you that there's a danger, a fight or flight type of incident. It's the same within in our everyday living, in our workplace, in our home. If we see warning signs, those threat issues that we've just went through, and you feel it, someone else may be feeling it, someone else may be experiencing it, and we need to come forward and have discussions with others and let them know what we're experiencing or what we feel. So that is when it is time to speak up. And we need to take all of those experiences that we've developed over time, those relationships with our staff, those relationships with each other, that when we see something that we think is wrong, when we see behaviors, the bullying, the cursing, the arguments, the physical pushing, we need to speak up. And I know that's difficult sometimes, especially when you're working with people on an everyday basis. But it is critical that we have an environment where it's safe to speak, that we bring it forward whenever we feel that it's time to bring it forward. So that is all I have on workplace violence. I'm going to move right into the active shooter presentation. And the first thing we have is a video. And hopefully, not only does this work, but we can hear the sound. So if you cannot hear the sound on the video, please let me know. Run, Hide, Fight, it's an active shooter video that's been out there. The video is only 5 minutes long, but it's a precursor to what we're going to talk about next. And it's, like I said, it's just called Run, Hide, Fight. Well, okay, I'm going to share a different screen. Oh. I'm sorry, bear with me just 1 second.
No worries, Mike. This actually gives people a moment to consider any questions that they might have and go ahead and enter those in the chat while we're getting this video up and running.
Michael, can you hear this?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
It may feel like just another day at the office, but occasionally, life feels more like an action movie than reality. The authorities are working hard to protect you and to protect our public spaces. But sometimes bad people do bad things. Their motivations are different. The warning signs may vary, but the devastating effects are the same. And unfortunately, you need to be prepared for the worst. If you were ever to find yourself in the middle of an active shooter event, your survival may depend on whether or not you have a plan. The plan doesn't have to be complicated. There are 3 things you could do that make a difference. Run, hide, fight. First and foremost, if you can get out, do. Always try and escape or evacuate, even when others insist on staying. Encourage others to leave with you, but don't let them slow you down with indecision. Remember what's important, you, not your stuff. Leave your belongings behind and try to find a way to get out safely. Trying to get yourself out of harm's way needs to be your #1 priority.
Stop that guy! Stop that guy! Hey!
Once you are out of the line of fire, try to prevent others from walking into the danger zone and call 911.
Yes, sir. Washington, help us!
If you can't get out safely, you need to find a place to hide. Act quickly and quietly. Try to secure your hiding place the best you can. Turn out lights, and if possible, remember to lock doors. Silence your ringer and vibration mode on your cell phone. And if you can't find a safe room or closet, try to conceal yourself behind large objects that may protect you. Do your best to remain quiet and calm. As a last resort, if your life is at risk, whether you are alone or working together as a group, fight. Act with aggression. Improvise weapons. Disarm him. And commit to taking the shooter down, no matter what. Try to be aware of your environment. Always have an exit plan. Know that in an incident like this, victims are generally chosen randomly. The event is unpredictable and may evolve quickly. The first responders on the scene are not there to evacuate or tend to the injured. They are well trained and are there to stop the shooter. Your actions can make a difference for your safety and survival. Be aware and be prepared. And if you find yourself facing an active shooter, there are 3 key things you need to remember to survive. Run, hide, fight.
Okay, I will get back to the presentation. Okay, we should be back.
We're good.
Okay. So what is an active shooter? It's an individual actively engaging and killing or attempting to kill people in a confined and populated area. And law enforcement is starting to call this an active killer situation more than an active shooter situation. In most cases, they use firearms, and there's no pattern of method to their selection of victims. In some cases, the victims are targeted. At least one of the victims is targeted, or 2 of the victims are targeted, but bystanders will become targets as well. Because active shooter situations are often over within 10 or 15 minutes, before law enforcement arrives on a scene, individuals must be prepared both mentally and physically to deal with an active shooter situation. So in law enforcement, with police officers, They train constantly with their firearm. It is typically, 2 to 4 times a year they're at a range working on their proficiency with a firearm. That is not only for, it's not just for target practice. It is not just for the proficiency. It is also because as police officers, you have to be prepared to know that you may have to pull a trigger. And as citizens nowadays working in environments, in healthcare, in the construction industry, on a construction site, in our office buildings, you at least always have to be somewhat prepared for, if something happens, what would I do? I'll give 2 examples. A coworker at BJC, somebody that I know very well, just recently was at home at night, 3 o'clock in the morning, and sound asleep, him, his wife, and his child. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, he hears glass breaking on his house. It was somebody within the community had broken out the front window of his house with a rock and was now banging on his front door. So his wife called 911, called the police. He did what most homeowners would do. What some homeowners would do is he retrieved a handgun from in his house, and he was standing in his living room with his gun focused on the front door, anticipating that whoever this was going to come through that door at any minute. And as he's there, he is mentally preparing. He was mentally preparing for what was going to be next. And that is a worst case scenario, but that is just something that was in a very nice community within St. Louis, within the St. Louis area, that just happened recently. And we never know when those situations are going to arise. And we have to at least have a thought process down about, if this happens, what steps would I take? Fortunately, in this instance, the police arrived before the person was able to get through the front door. It was somebody who had taken some narcotics, and he had a bad reaction to them. And so it was not a targeted incident. It was just a random incident by somebody who lives in the neighborhood that was mentally, physically, and narcotically impaired, causing him to randomly break out a window of a house in a neighborhood. But we just never know when that type of incident could occur to us. So we want to have those thought processes in our place. Police officers have nightmares. And I will tell you, the nightmare that every police officer has, people I've talked to, they all express the same situation. That when they all have a dream of, they become involved in an incident such as this. And when they go to use their weapon, it either falls apart or it doesn't fire. And those are all the mental processes that police officers go through in order to be able to be prepared and to know how they're going to react when this type of situation occurs. So what to do in an active shooter event, good practices for coping with an active shooter event. Always be aware of your environment and any possible dangers. We talked about trusting your gut. If you note significant changes are just little bits of pieces of numbers of changes that are occurring that tell you that something's wrong. And if your gut and your brain are telling you that something's wrong, just be wary and talk to others. Always take note of the 2 nearest exits in any facility you visit. If police officers always sit with their door, so if a police officer goes to a restaurant, they always sit facing the door. They want to see what is coming at them and what their escape route is if they need to take an escape route. So always know where your nearest exits are in any facility you visit. If you are in an office, stay there and secure the door. Look at your environment and make sure that when you are constructing your own workspaces, that you take into account, if something were to occur and we need to put different locks on our doors, we need to create safe rooms, which we'll talk about in a minute. Those are things we need to think about when we're building, designing, and when we're working. Just know your own workspace and think about what you would do if if something occurred very quickly. If you're in a hallway, get out of the hallway, get into a room, secure the door. As a last resort, attempt to take the shooter down using whatever tools are at your disposal. In healthcare, we tell people, if you are in a patient room and there's an active shooter incident, we have IV poles. IV poles are great weapons. Use an IV pole. You can swing, you can jab, you can do all kinds of things. When it comes down to as a last resort, we do whatever we can to survive. And then call 911 when it is safe to do so immediately. Silence your phone, call as discreetly as possible. Turn off, if you're in a room and computer's playing music, turn off the music. Make yourself as quiet as you can. What to tell 911 when you call them. You need to let them know the physical address of the building and the location of the shooter. If it's a multi-wing building, they want to be able to respond as quickly as possible. And oftentimes in large buildings, they're not going to know the layout of the building. The person who is actively shooting, actively killing, may know the routes in the building better than the police officers that are responding. Physical description of the shooters and the name of the shooter if known. If this is somebody who's a former employee, somebody who's worked with in the past, let them know the name of the shooter. They will do a background check as officers are arriving. Let them know the number of types of weapons held by the shooters. Oftentimes these are lone shooter incidents, but Columbine was multiple students. So we want to be able to give them as much information about the shooters, the types of weapons as possible, and then the number of potential victims at the location. You want to let them know how many people are in the workspace. You may not know that 2 people are injured, but you know that 40 people are in the workspace. That's important information for the police officers to know. The security teams, and this is just another note about, a lot of our buildings nowadays have local security. Hospitals all have a local armed security officers that are trained in active shooter response. They all today wear a physical uniform. And the reason for that is specifically because of active shooter events. So private security teams wear a uniform that looks very similar to a police officer. Hospitals especially would love to have their security teams in a suit, a tie, and a very nice pair of pants with a weapon that's not visible. They want them to look like the Secret Service, but that's not allowed, because in an active shooter event, police officers that are responding want to know who the foe is and who the good guys are. So the security teams are dressed similar to police nowadays. And the reason for that is specifically because of past active shooter events, especially in courts where it was not known who the suspect was, who the undercover police officers were. So they try and solve for that through the uniforms now. In the video, you notice that the person that came in to do the shooting was dressed tactically. That is why we do not allow those tactical outfits for the response teams today that are responding to these incidents. We want to know who's good, who's the bad. Quickly, so what to do in an active shooter event: quickly determine the most reasonable way to protect your own life. Remember, your customers and clients are likely to follow the lead of employees and managers during an active shooter event. So people who are visiting, people who are guests of your business or guests on the work site, they're going to trust the employees to know the best routes, the best hiding places. So they're going to turn to you because they're going to be lost. So please take the leadership when we can to make sure that we're also protecting others besides yourself. and then get out. So that's the run. If there's an accessible path, attempt to evacuate the premises. Always have an escape route and a plan in mind. Evacuate regardless of whether others agree to follow. In a life or death situation that's evolving very rapidly, if you encounter someone who does not want to go with you, do not slow your egress to help others. It is critical that you make decisions as quickly as you can, and it's not time for arguments. Protect your life. Leave your belongings behind. There's nothing that you have that is so important that you need to take it with you. So leave your belongings behind. There'll always be time later to come back and get them. And then help others escape if possible. Prevent individuals from entering the area. We saw that in the video. You know, if somebody's entering a business where an active shooter is occurring and they're not aware of it, do not allow them to enter. Keep your hands visible. That's what police officers are always looking for. They're looking at hands. They want to know where the weapons are at. So keep your hands visible. Follow the instructions of any police officers. So if the police officers are giving you, they will try and give you very clear, concise instructions. It's not going to be a paragraph. It's going to be words. So pay attention to the words and follow the police officer's instructions. Do not attempt to move wounded people. The police officers themselves, I think you saw in the video, they walk past wounded people. Their role is to stop the active shooter as quickly as possible. So people who are wounded, they're going to bypass and they will come back and get. And then, as we said, call 911 as soon as you're safe. And then hide out. If you can't get out, find a place to hide where the active shooter is less likely to find you. Be out of the active shooter's view. That's why a lot of buildings today, they're building doors that have very small windows or no windows at all. And it's to allow people to be in a room unseen so that they can protect themselves. Provide protection if shots are fired in your direction. Go to an office, close the door, put furniture in front of the door, barricade yourself in. If people are knocking on the door and trying to get in, do not allow them. I know that sounds harsh, but you do not know who the foe is and who the good people are. So it may be the active shooter attempting to get you to open the door to allow them in. Lock the door, blockade the door, silence your cell phone and be quiet. We talked about that a little while ago. As a last resort, and only when your life is in imminent danger, do everything you can to disrupt and incapacitate the shooter. Acting as aggressively as possible against him. Use your words, yelling, screaming, throwing items, improvising weapons that we talked about. And then once you make that decision, you're committed to that decision. So then what happens next? So as I said, law enforcement's purpose is to stop the active shooter as soon as possible. They're going to come in, typically they're going to go directly to the area where the last shots were heard. They typically arrive in teams of 4. You saw that in the video, but things have changed with that. And the reason things have changed with that was there was an active shooter in a school down in Florida where there was a police officer that was heavily criticized for waiting on the parking lot far back up to arrive before he went in. And the reason for that is that was the way they trained. You either responded to these incidents in teams of 3 or 4. So what's changed is law enforcement has been told now that if there is an active event, shots are being fired, you are to enter that building by yourself as quickly as you can to try and put down the threat. So you may see teams of 4, you may see teams of 1, but police officers will get in there as quickly as they can. You may see regular patrol uniforms, you may see external bulletproof vests, Kevlar helmets. That is only if they have the time to put those on, and other tactical equipment. And they may they may be armed with rifles, shotguns, and handguns. First responders typically will only have a handgun or a rifle that would be in their patrol car. So what to do when you see a police officer: remain calm, follow their instructions. I said they're going to be very quick, concise, short instructions. Put down anything in your hand. Police officers pay attention to hands in these active events. That's the first thing they look at is people's hands. So you don't want to have anything in your hand that could be misconstrued as a weapon. So don't put anything in your hand. Immediately raise hands and spread your fingers. Keep your hands visible at all times. Don't make quick movements. Don't run towards the officer. Don't hug the officers. Don't hold on to them for safety. Whatever direction the officer is coming from, you go behind them. You go past them and away from them. They're coming from a safe point towards the danger. So you want to go behind them back towards the safe points. Do not ask them for directions. Just proceed in the direction in which the officers are entering the premise. Be aware. So, and this is the before the incident occurs. It's important nowadays. Most threats are made through cryptic social media mentions, postings about your business, about their actions. So I know at BJC, we have a team, our media relations team. They monitor every social media posting that is made about BJC. And there are times where the postings are threatening, harassing in nature, and then we bring those towards security. But you always want to know what people are saying about your business. We talked about this during the workplace violence dialogue. Alert your staff to threats. If there is a serious threat made towards your business, made towards specific people within your business, it's okay to share that information on a level that people need to know. They need to know if a former employee is making threats and that they're no longer allowed on the business site, and if they're seen on the business site, that you need to alert people. That's okay. We need to do everything we can to protect each other. And then whenever you start a new site, a new construction area, be aware of where you're going to be doing your construction. Check with your local police. I put on here, Google neighborhood crimes as if you were moving your family to this neighborhood. Know what's occurring. A lot of our businesses nowadays, especially in like Spire, formerly Laclede Gas, Spire has police officers that work with them now. And when they go into areas where there is a possible threat, they put police officers in there to monitor them to make sure that their employees are safe. And that's a result of a Spire worker that was killed a few years ago while he was working in a hole in the ground, and was targeted because the person who shot him was angry about a Spire bill and took it out on the employee. So create emergency action plans. So creating a committee of employees who can create an emergency action plan. But this needs to be a team. This should not be just one employee making these decisions. And these emergency action plans should include how to communicate the danger. So if something is occurring, how are you going to alert employees so that people who are not currently on the site know that there's an event on the site so they don't respond there? The people on the site, how are you going to be able to communicate to what is quickly occurring, where it's occurring, and a rallying point if necessary? Although I would not suggest announcing a rallying point broadly, because you're just going to be telling the person who's causing the harm where you're going to be going. You develop safe locations. So a lot of times people do fire drills, and when they do fire drills, people evacuate buildings and they go to a safe location. it should be the same for an active shooter event. Have a rallying point previously established that is well off of it's not right across the street from your building. It is someplace that is nearby, secluded, so that you can start to take account of your employees as they arrive out of the building. Designate safe areas within the building. So it is within healthcare. Every area is designed so that there is a safe room that is known to the employees within their work area. We tell our staff that if there's a major event, know where your safe room's at. And we don't put a sign on the door that says safe room, because that would just draw the attention of the threat. But we do put some type of symbol that is only known to the employees on the door so that people know where to go. Sometimes these are bathrooms that can be locked from the inside, that have solid walls, solid doors, do not have windows on the doors. Those types of things should be taken into consideration. And then we talked about rallying points for your staff, and there should always be at least 2. And then again, if critical, that if we see something, we say something. If your gut tells you something's wrong, if you're hearing things that are threatening, that are concerning, alert your manager, human resources, let someone know. Don't have a regret later that you suspected something was going to occur and you didn't speak up. So that is all I have. My contact information's there as well. Just, it's very simple, michael.lauer@bjc.org. If anybody has a discussion, has a question that they do not want to post in the chat today, or if they do not want to verbalize, but you have a question, concern, please do not hesitate to reach out to me and let me know. I'll be happy to respond, happy to look into it for you.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate that. I think it was a great presentation. And we do have some questions in our chat, which unfortunately my screen just went black. So give me a moment, please, so I can get that back up again.
Michael, I'll help with this. So the first question, your thoughts on race, ethnic-based violence instigated by employees and external players?
So is we talking about like extremist type of activity? Is that, I think that was Sal that raised that question.
Yes, Sal.
No, we've seen a rise in violence by either employees, disgruntled employees, or people angry for some reason or another that are based on violence towards racial groups, ethnic groups, and women on the rise. And I was wondering how this plays into both our workplaces, our offices, and also out in the construction sites.
Yeah, and go ahead, Sal.
I want to post a couple sources here. One's from OSHA, one's from SHRM, and so just to address those issues. So I was just wondering what your perspective was or experience with those types of crimes and violence.
Yeah, so it is something we are very aware of, especially so just in my industry at BJC. There, for instance, Barnes Jewish Hospital is always concerned about ethnic targeting based upon the Jewish name within its business. Just recently there was, and I'm trying to reflect because it was just 2 months ago, there was some issues over in Israel that raised some concerns for people within our community, and they I think it was when Israel was targeting Palestine or something like that a couple months ago. But anyway, it brought uh, a response to the hospital where there was active protests outside. So we're very in tune to that. And what we do is the social media presence monitoring is something that we are very aware of. The other thing that we do, and I didn't mention this during my presentation, but there's a place within the city of St. Louis is lucky that we have what's called the St. Louis Fusion Center. And it's a private industry that works with law enforcement. And anytime that we hear of potential protests, whether they're related to activities in our communities, or if it's an active threat against our business or industry, we notify the St. Louis Fusion Center, and they take that information and they investigate it, and typically will give you feedback and alerts about that particular incident, so that you can become more aware of not only what is occurring, what could occur, but also it allows them to share those concerns with others in the community that may have similar worries about their business.
Great presentation, by the way. And it looks like we have some work to do in front of us. I was really struck by the bullying aspect, and there is racial bullying on our work sites, on our construction work sites. We know that. And so what we want to do is prevent it escalating
right
into violent acts. So I really appreciate your presentation. Thank you, Mike.
My pleasure.
Sal's comments lead us directly into the next question that's there, where Mike had mentioned the critical nature of relationship building with our coworkers. Any suggestions for those who are living in the new remote work environment when we're not able to be there physically? How could it be possible to build those relationships?
Yes, I'm experiencing that right now because I'm working from home most of the time, as is Michael. So I connect with my teams regularly. I set up one-on-ones with everyone. We typically set them aside for about half an hour. We discuss not only what's occurring within their work, but that also gives me the opportunity to have those personal conversations with my team. Michael has a daughter. I typically will ask him how the daughter's doing, how school's going. I believe she's in 3rd grade this year, and we talk about how that's going, how that's changing, how are they doing with the work with working from going to school, homeschooled. Although I think they're in school this year. So yes, it is much more difficult. I know a lot of the construction sites are active, so the rounding on there is very easy, but or at least I believe it's easier. But yeah, we have to make the use of the tools that we have now. So we use Teams at BJC, but if you have the ability to connect with people via Zoom or Teams or whatever platform you have.
Thank you. And then we have another, in reference to mindfulness of changes to behaviors, what are some routes employers or even coworkers can take or suggest for the individual of concern to get them help? Beyond calling the police or just talking with them, are there any good local or national organizations or associations that can be involved to develop an intervention plan?
Yeah, so the EAP teams would be your resource if you have those connected to your business. But yeah, otherwise, I don't know of any local, national, or associations that would do that beyond our employee assistance programs. But this is also the key part of our developing relationships with our staff. Is the first level of conversation is oftentimes with them. Just pulling them in, having a conversation about how they're doing. Is anything going on? There's nothing wrong with saying we're a little concerned about some changes in your behaviors, some changes in your work. Is there anything going on that we can help you with? Those types of things. That should always be the first level of intervention. And then we can go from there, because they may be open to having a discussion that may solve some of those issues. They may not be, but that would always be the first step.
Thank you. And then it was asked, if you have a hospital full of patients, how do you protect the patients when they cannot evacuate?
Yeah, so this is what nurses struggle with, because nurses are, they're at the bedside, and their sole role is to take care of people. And in active shooter situations, they tell you to run. Well, nurses aren't going to run. They're going to make sure that their patients are safe. And the question I get from them all the time is, if I run, am I going to be in trouble? If I stay, am I going to be in trouble? And what we tell them is you have to make the best decision for you in the moment. And so you need to start thinking about this now, that if something occurs, what am I going to do? Am I going to jump on top of my patient and protect them? Am I going to run? And it's a personal choice. But so we don't tell them this is what you have to do. But yes, you're right. This is a very difficult and concerning issue for healthcare. We have the ability to lock down some of our units through fire doors, which can prevent some spread of an active shooter event, but it's not perfect.
Thank you. And I think your comment there is something that we all need to take forward for our organizations, for our project sites, is to start thinking now, planning, preparing. Do we need policies? Do we need programs? Do we just need to make sure that we're communicating? So another question that I personally have listed is, do you have any suggestions regarding the changing landscape of a construction environment? So one beginning from a greenfield site all the way through completion, because we all recognize there's a vast difference in the project lifespan of what might occur and what actions can be taken.
Yes, and you're also dealing with numerous people entering the construction site on a given day. Contractors that are being brought in. So yes, it's a very difficult process to manage. But I think you just, as workers, you need to be aware of your surroundings, and you typically know what your day involves and what people are supposed to be doing on a work site. So note changes. Note, when somebody enters a workspace that is acting differently than what would be a normal given, whether that person's just coming in to try and steal tools or sabotage, a workspace, just always be aware of your surroundings. And I know that's difficult sometimes because you want to be very focused on what you're doing. Some of the things that are occurring on a construction site require a lot of concentration, but as best you can, just be aware of your surroundings. Try and protect the area as much as you can. Cameras are extremely important. I know sometimes they only tell you what occurred, they don't prevent what could occur. Access controls, whenever you have access controls, if you have the ability to add those, and I know it's not easily done in an open field space, but controlling your ingress and egress is critical, and making sure that we don't have people that aren't supposed to be on a construction site, whether that's for theft purposes, for assaultive purposes. We need to make sure that we lock them down as much as we possibly can. I doubt I answered your question, but it's about the best I can do, Michael.
Thank you for the effort. Any other questions? Well, I'd like to thank you, Mike, and thank everybody for attending today. And then I'm going to turn this over to Kelly.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much, Mike. Obviously, for some of us, not a lot of us necessarily have heard this information before, but certainly have thought about it, but have not seen any kind of training or any, when you're in a very small office space, you really don't hear anything about this, but you think about it. So we really appreciate that. One of the things, speaking of thinking about it, if there's one takeaway that you would like to post, this is speaking to everyone who has attended. It would be great if you used LinkedIn. If you're on LinkedIn, just post one takeaway, hashtag it SLC3 safety. You can link the council to it, but getting this message out and continuing this message and then how important this is critical. We will share this information as well through our website, and a copy of this presentation will go to all those who have registered. We had one question about the PowerPoint. I'm assuming, Mike, it's not a problem to share the PowerPoint on our website.
Yep.
So that will be under our resources tab as usual. So make sure to check that out. So thank you, Michael Hargrave, too, for emceeing and taking care of this program and asking Mike to speak. And of course, Mike for preparing. And then thanks to their sponsors and to our safety committee, as always, for working really hard on all of this. And the last and not least, the evaluation form is very important to us. So that will be sent out to you via the electronic survey. Please complete that. We really appreciate that. We really take your comments into evaluation as far as future programs. So we appreciate that. Have a great one. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here.
Thank you.
Have a great one.
Thank you.
Thank you.